Thank you for coming to tonight's screening of My Friends, the Comedians. Please ensure that you have your cell phone silenced. Enjoy the show.
Hello, fellow joke enthusiasts, comedy connoisseurs, and champions of chuckle. Welcome back to the show. If you're new here, my name is Jacob Marscola, and this is My Friends, the Comedians, a podcast where I sit down with a friend and discuss the mysterious, delirious, and unserious realm of comedy. Sitting across from me is a friend of mine who just so happens to be a comedian. Ladies and gentlemen, this may be one of the 5 reasons that I have a club to be spending time doing comedy in. He is a comedic partner of mine in many projects we've worked on, and he's been gone from Ridiculum for a while, so it's good to be talking again. Please welcome Andrew Mister.
I am so happy to be across from you with a mic between us again.
I know, 2 of them now.
This feels wrong.
Which is great. It is weird that, I am, it's the same distance that we used to be.
Yeah.
But it is nice to have this is mine.
Yeah, and like different lighting.
Yeah, it's
no
not.
echo.
No echo. Oh my gosh, yeah. I told Mr., welcome to the show. I told Mr. Before we started, I was like, God, I wish I had started a radio show or knew about WXVU when we did one semester, a podcast that we did a little bit ago, because we were recording that in like a shitty sound room in a VTV studio with one omnidirectional mic that like didn't really give us the quality we fully wanted, but it was good enough.
Yeah, this though feels like such a step up. I have headphones on.
I love it.
That are playing Jacob and Mai's audio back, and I feel like I'm actually a professional.
Yeah, it's really nice. And God, this was here. This was here in 2022. I wish we knew about it. But we're here now. It's been a while since we've talked on a podcast.
It's been a long time.
It's been a long, close to 2 years.
Year?
Close to 2 years.
Okay.
Close to 2. For context, Mr. and I, as I said, we've worked on many projects together. He's a creative partner of mine, and we worked on many projects. One of the first ones was a podcast called One Semester, which was a comedy podcast, I'd call it. But it was an experiment in which we only recorded for one semester, and then Andrew left college, and we stopped doing the show.
Yeah, for the podcast. I should have graduated.
Yeah, you should have. Yeah, absolutely. He didn't have to stick around, but he did stay. But yeah, we now you're doing some stuff. I'm doing some stuff. It's been a little bit, though. I've seen you in like twice in the last month, so
Yeah.
it doesn't feel like it's been that long.
Yeah, it's been weird that I feel like I see you a lot, but that's more over Zoom than in person.
Yes.
And we're not doing like creative projects, but we're like playing games and stuff.
Yeah.
But I have so deeply missed doing something creative and intentionally comedic with you.
Absolutely. We both of us done projects with other people and working on that, but coming back to it is really cool. But you're on my show now.
Yeah, what are we talking about? We spent the entire summer writing the 3rd movie in the Now You See Me franchise. We did have a project.
We did have a
recently.
project. I guess more recently, that as well, but also alongside with like Miguel, you've worked on Zoom Survivor, and I've worked on other like VTV stuff. We've gotten to work with other people since we stopped one semester, and yet we've continued to work with each other, which is great. But this is my show, so we get to do what I want to do.
And it's nice to not like have the reins front and like have to come up with it. I just get to sit here and answer your questions.
You said a similar thing last night too, which is what I talked with Frank about. Of like, for context, you're here also for the alumni stand-up show, and you were like, it's nice to just be watching y'all set up, and I just have to worry about being funny tonight.
Yeah, because when I was in the club, I co-founded it, so I was always in a position of like setting stuff up, trying to build this thing to be bigger than it previously was.
Mm-hmm.
So I never had the second to just like sit back and be like, this is someone else's problem. And so when I came here and was watching like Jacob and Kevin run around and set up, there was that part of me that was like, I need to help them. I need to do these things. And then I was like, no, you don't.
No, you absolutely don't. I think I'm excited to come back and do alumni stuff and not have that, but I wouldn't call myself a control freak, but I've enjoyed having the executive control and having like a leadership position in this club.
Power is fun to have.
It's
Jacob.
really fun. God, I was I was itching for it. I think the minute I knew you could have a leadership position in Ridiculum, I was like, I want to run this fucking club. But it's so cool. Before we get into talking about the club, talking about anything, we have a preliminary thing to hit. It's contractually obligated. Is to ask you what your coffee table book is.
Yes, and I actually know what the premise of this question is because I've been listening to the episodes.
You have,
and so I've come prepared with 2 options.
Interesting. Do I get to pick or do you get to pick?
I'll tell you the 2, and then you pick which one you think I should have. I would have both of them if I could, but we'll let you pick one.
Mm-hmm.
So the first one is a book full of model trains and model train layouts, and it's just like a picture book, and there's like a few captions on it. When I was a kid, my grandfather would always bring me the Lionel train magazines. There's like the model trains, like if you've seen like trains around a Christmas tree, those are probably like Lionel trains.
Mm-hmm.
And he would always bring me the magazines after he would read them. And I realized I never read them. They were full of articles. I probably should have done that, but I loved looking at the picture of those. So option 1 is a book full of pictures of like model trains and the little layout, so I can take my fingers and trace the little layouts and be like, the train would go this way, and then it would go through this tunnel and across this bridge, and then it would take that switch.
That does fit. That fits a lot.
So that's one.
What's 2?
The other one is a sports almanac, and it's just full of brackets of every professional and college sports major like championship tournament. Mm-hmm. So it'd be like every year's March Madness bracket and every year's like NFL playoff bracket and NBA playoff bracket and all the major sports. And it would have the bracket, it'd have all the logos, have like a big logo with like the team that won and a little blurb that was like the story of the season and like something that makes you be like, this is what sports was about this year. So I could just thumb through it because I love looking at brackets and logos and teams and numbers.
Absolutely. That was that's the if you listened to Owen's episode, that's like similar to what Owen's was like. Owen was like stat facts, like Scholastic Reader stat facts, which is very him. Are we talking like we thinking maybe like Gray's Sports Almanac from like Back to the Future? Do you want that to be your book? That the version of that still kept going after 2015?
Yeah, and like I'd probably have to every few years buy a new edition, so I'd get like the last like 5 years of sports in it.
Yeah, I'll give you both. I think Noel had like 4 different comedic autobiographies. So
yes.
I'll let you have both.
I heard him say Bossy Pants in that episode, and I looked at my shelf where my unopened copy of Bossy Pants I got for Christmas in 2019 was sitting, and I was like, I will read that soon.
I should read it. Yeah, I think he said he's read it like twice. Yeah. I'll give you both. I like both. That both fit pretty well, and I like it a lot. I have enjoyed, and I got the same kind of answer from Frank, which you'll hear when that comes out. But it doesn't have to be like Comedy Central books. Mm-hmm. For like someone like Noel and like Kevin, yeah, that makes sense. Love that. They would have like comedy books like Jerry Seinfeld's book or like Amy Schumer. I was about to say Amy Poehler. But like, yeah, I love hearing the answer like Frank said, like it was like a paper on Are Robots Human or something like that. And that just really fits for me. And I love it a lot. And then mine, I finally decided to like look up the name of it, even though I forget every time I leave my apartment. But my book is called Improv Nation: How We Made a Great American Art. Still have yet to read it, and it looks really fascinating. And it's just like the history of how improv started. Mm-hmm. My brain's really been tickled with improv. Really not as much as stand-up. Or stand-up not as much, I mean. It's all over improv right now.
Tickled with improv.
Oh, yeah. I'm getting tickled every night with improv. I have dreams of making shit up, which is how dreams work. But I'm tickled with improv. You seem blown away or befuddled that I chose those words.
Yeah, it was just a really interesting rhetorical trick you just did right
Yeah,
there.
I don't really know. I think I just was like, you gotta keep talking. You're the host of the show. Just say tickled. And tickled was what came out.
Tickle me, Jacob.
Tickle me, Jake. That's isn't it? Tickle me, Elmo.
It's a command.
Real quick, we're gonna have to cut the show. I didn't enjoy that at all. That wasn't fun. Oh, also, before we start, you want to play with it now? I discovered that I have a soundboard next to me, and I didn't realize it. It's not like what I had imagined was going to be part of my show, but God, I need to play with it. So was this the laugh track one?
Yeah.
So if we said something funny like, Bazinga! Bazinga!
Bazinga!
Bazinga! And that's about as long as that show's laugh track usually goes.
Yeah, I was going to say,
It's still going.
I enjoyed Big Bang Theory. My parents really liked it. It's one of those shows that's like on TBS at like 7 to 10 p.m. every night. And I understand why some people didn't like it. I enjoyed it.
I think it's fine if people enjoy it. I think really it's just the laugh track thing that I think people had like an issue with. But that's also like, I think it might have just been.
It's a symptom of its time.
It's a symptom of its time. It's the sitcom. Like it makes total sense.
But every spoof of that, like I love the videos that were like the Big Bang Theory, but the entire audience is a vacuum cleaner, or like the Big Bang Theory, but just Ricky Gervais is in the audience. I love those videos.
Those are great.
It's so good. I like when people clown on the Big Bang Theory in like a fun way that feels like, oh, they watch the show and like get what to spoof about, and not just like, oh, smart people and that's so dumb.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's room to make fun of that, especially because I mean it was one of the most successful sitcoms. It wasn't just like this bullshit.
It's a
like
sitcom
nerd
for nerds, and it's like if you're not a nerd, it's not for you.
Yeah.
And you're like, why is this a sitcom for nerds?
Even if you're
because that's what it is. Like, why is Sports Center like for sports? This should be for artists. No, it's Sports Center. It's not for you.
That's what it's for. Also, like even if you're not a nerd, it's fun to watch to make fun of the nerds, and that's what that's also for.
And that's what Penny's character was. Penny's character was like the voice of reason to be like nerds.
Penny was like the straight man, like the not nerd, and it was like that's interesting. Yeah, because I think and a good move on that show too, because I do think it might have been really easy for like someone passionate about that kind of show being made to go, we don't need that kind of a character. We're all going to be nerds. They're going to be all nerds. It's super easy for that to happen, and it didn't. And it's great that a character like Penny showed up, and I'm sure there were like some other like straight man characters, but it's great. We're done talking about one of your favorite shows, and instead we're going to talk about your favorite club. I don't know if you have another favorite club, or I don't know.
Nova Quizza.
No, cat. So Andrew, there's so much we could talk about, and I'm sure you're going to come back onto my show.
Yeah.
So really,
with the amount that people talk about me on this show, which
has been a lot, and there's a reason.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I wanted people to, like, find Ridiculum and find their place in it, and, I wanted to be a part of their story, but I, like, did not ever realize how influential I was to a lot of people, and hearing people say stuff that, like, they've never said to me, I was like, whoa.
Yeah, and it's and that can either come from like you as a teacher of improv, teacher of stand-up, or just the fact that you initiated something that's still going. And that might even be more of it. Not to discredit your specific comedic abilities, but it might even for some people just be this exists because you and 4 other people were like, hey, let's go.
Because I hear people talk about it, I'm like, there's no way this was me. There's no way you just saw my face. This is Stockholm Syndrome.
You can't,
I didn't do this.
You can't get away from it. So let's start there, unless it doesn't start there. Does it start before then in terms of your comedy journey?
Yeah, let's go back.
Let's go back.
So the Industrial Revolution.
And you were there.
Yeah. No, I would say, like, when I was a kid, I had an interesting relationship to like the idea of like an audience and like getting attention, because I enjoyed attention, but I wanted to be really good at it. Like, I've never been a good singer. I don't have a good singing voice. Auto-tune is my best friend. And so when I was in elementary school, we would always have a show every year for every grade where you would like sing as a choir of children. And I hated that. I hated standing on some risers and singing songs that I didn't like and was not good at singing. But I liked, like, when the audience would clap and, like, seeing people smile. And I was like, this is an interesting thing.
Yeah.
And I liked when people laughed. That felt like a good reaction to get out of people. But I didn't necessarily think, like, I wanted to do comedy at that point. I still really liked music. And I played a bunch of instruments. And so I was still like, I think maybe music's my thing. And in high school, I got into music. I had a band. We wrote some songs that are now intimately familiar with Jacob and this podcast.
If you recognize Mr's voice, no, you don't, but you will recognize his song, which is at the beginning and ending
it's
of the
not
show.
my voice.
It's not his voice, no, but it is his. It's his music.
But so as I did that and I was like writing music, I was not a good lyricist. I was like fake emo, like, I'm so tortured and life's so hard and I'm depressed. No, I wasn't. It wasn't that bad. I look at lyrics I wrote when I was a kid, and I was like, you don't deserve to write this. You're fine.
You're
it's
okay.
not that bad.
I feel the same. I didn't necessarily like write lyrics, but just like the general attitude, I was like, no one gets it. It's like, everyone else gets it. You got right out of white high school. Everyone else gets it, man.
Yeah, I should have come prepared to read some lyrics. They're on my phone, but I don't want to take away too much time.
That'll be when I have another show called My Friends the Musicians.
Yeah, we'll have another creative outlet where I'll read these to you at some point because they are so embarrassing.
I'm sure, man. I believe it.
And in high school, I also ran the theater tech. So I ran the soundboard. I also oversaw the light board. That was like my big home.
Mm-hmm.
And I really enjoyed the shows, and again saw people like getting attention on stage, and was like, I like the production side, but I like attention, and I like funny and comedy, and I'd found stand-up and was like, this feels like a fun way to meet all these things. But I didn't have the tools to pursue any of that. Both my school didn't have like a formal improv club or like stand-up. My friends at the time were not like really into that kind of thing, so it wasn't something I felt very comfortable like sharing with them a lot. And even then, I just felt like they weren't the most open to it. And I think some of it might be now, like, I've kind of rewritten some of the mental history in my head of like how they treated me, and with like some of those things, probably was not that bad.
No.
But like, you know, I just found like they weren't really into those things, and I was like, well, that's disappointing because I think I might want to be. And so when I came to college, I kind of gave myself the permission to have a hard reset. And I was like, I think comedy is something that does interest me. I like jokes. I like getting people to laugh. I want to try to do that with consistency and not just like sitting around with friends and like talking and like trying to like lob a joke in while we're like playing a game. Because I think that was the other thing, is like we'd play like a lot of Super Smash Bros. And stuff. I was not good at that game, but I got such a kick out of like being Bowser and picking people up and jumping off the stage, or like being Kirby and like sucking them up and jumping off the stage.
Yeah.
Just like being a bit of a troll and like a laugh. And I think that those were the moments where I was like, I like making people laugh. And so in college, I joined Villanova Television, a club that had been around for a while because there was something called the entertainment branch. And in the entertainment branch, it was basically sketch writing. And I was like, this is what's available to me at the time. I'm going to use this as my platform to try to start like writing and being funny. Within a few weeks of my freshman year, two upperclassmen, Meg and Claire Reckner, joined or were in VTV and hopped into a meeting and were like, we want to start an improv club, like a formal one. We need people to sign up and make it happen. And
you're like, wait a minute, that's what I want.
If we talk, like, you talk about like moments that happen and you have no idea how important they are. Because I could have easily said no, or even just been non-committal. But I said yes, and was like very adamant that like, I want to do this. I have been looking for something like this. Please give me the information. And as an 18-year-old kid who was so desperate to find themselves, I was like, I have to show up to every one of these or they won't like me, and I'll be bad, and they'll get rid of me, and it'll all be over, and I'll have missed my shot, which is not true.
Which is not the truth.
But so a week later, we met in Gary B4, I think it was. He was like all the way on the far side of campus, and it was 5 of us, I think. There were like 4 or 5 of us.
So these 5 show up. It wasn't like so obviously you have Megan Claire who like initiates this.
Claire Reckner.
And
I then had Claire Roberts was there, who was my year. She was a really good friend of mine at the time. And I'm pretty sure Grant was at the first one.
I believe you've written in Ridicu-Lore, which is this document that tells the story of Ridiculum, which I fucking love and no one else does but you and me.
Yeah, which makes me sound like a lunatic.
No, I love it. I love it, and I'm so excited it's a thing. But I believe those are the 5 names that are documented there.
And so it was the 5 of us in that basement classroom, and I barely knew improv. So we were just learning the tenets and like learning to be weird. And so the thing I remember from that practice was we played the dating game, which is where one person leaves the room and is not allowed to know any information. And the other people in the room are contestants on this dating show. And each person is given a character or some kind of quirk about them. So maybe it's like your left armpit is just really itchy. Or maybe like you're Barack Obama.
Yeah.
Like it can range from like a weird tick to like an impersonation. I was an X Games skater.
This is your first improv scene.
It may not be my first scene, but it was at the first practice.
First
and
practice.
It was something that like, it's the thing that I remember from that practice.
Okay, great.
And I remember in the dating game getting up on my chair, like first of all, flipping my chair out and then getting up on it and like stepping on the back of it and tipping it forward like I was dipping into a half pipe.
Oh, no.
And that got a huge laugh from the other 4 people in the room.
Hold on. Let's paint this picture. In dating game, there's 3 other people.
Yes.
So the one audience member.
I'm like pretty sure it was like Meg Carter was the person who was guessing, and it was Claire Reckner, Claire Roberts, and me. And Grant Haugo was in the corner doing God's knows what, because that's what Grant loved to do.
That's crazy to think about.
I remember getting up on that chair and like tipping it over and I'd be like, I'm diving in or something, and getting a laugh from that. And like it really setting up that character and that kind of just like throwing yourself into this thing for a moment. And that was my like, I like this. This is really fun. And so like a week or 2 later, Chris Whitty and Jack Brenner start showing up to the practices. And these are like juniors at the time who are friends with Claire Reckner. And there were like 7 of us for that first semester. And at the end of that first semester, we wrote a sketch for Villanova Television's Christmas Spectacular. And I remember taking a bit of a lead on that because I had some of the idea of like Christmas movies, but like they're a little too realistic. So there was one where it was like the Polar Express, which is a really creepy concept if you think about just this conductor like putting kids in a train and being like, we're going to go see Santa.
Yeah.
So we like had like the scene where it's like, oh, the North Pole, of course. This is the Polar Express. And they'd be like, please come on in. And by the way, as you get on my train, I am legally required to tell you that I am a register. And like how we did it was that Vince Mocco, who was in VTV at the time, but interested in improv, was helping us with it. And he was pretending to watch these movies. And he'd be like, pause. And then he would be like, rewind. And we would like have slightly changed it and be like, what's wrong with these DVDs?
This was kind of like a scripted TV remote.
Yeah, it was like a scripted TV remote. And that got good laughs. And it was really weird, but funny, and kind of set that like, okay, these people are funny, they're trying, and they're open to a lot of things. We then go into the following semester, and Ridiculum grows exponentially. They now officially have an executive board that I was not on, because I was a freshman.
Totally fair.
I was like, I don't think I want to be having this responsibility yet. But I also was like, I am a leader in this club. I've been around it for a little bit, and not much, so I don't have a lot of seniority, but like I care a lot about it. I want to be the person that can be kind of a free agent and be like, hey, tell me if you need help. I want to help. And we got a bunch of new members, and that's where like Jay Dolan came in. That's where we got Tim Kroll, who was just the year above me, and a few other members. And if you then go watch Word Vomit, our first show, you can see kind of what that first iteration of Ridiculum looked like.
Yeah.
It was very hodgepodge. It was very much figuring it out as we goes. Like, we weren't just like doing improv. This club was an active improv scene happening where we were having to figure out the games of the club and stuff. And like, as we would do practices, these like little jokes that have now like continued forward are like where they started, where like we just had one practice where it was one of the early ones in that first semester where like we kept doing scenes and like it just kept on resulting in like someone was someone else's dad, but they were their son, and like these like kind of like incesty scenes where we're like, okay, we have creatively bankrupted this concept. It was like funny ones. There will be no more scenes where there is implied incest.
Yep.
And has developed this rule that is still today in the club, from my understanding.
It's a hard
the first rule of Ridiculum.
It's the
no
first one we
incest.
mentioned, I think. Yeah, either that or I think Clockwise Club we've maybe brought to for the forefront now. But yeah, it's big.
And it's funny because that term had then like matured into not just like no incest in scenes, but like no club incest, where we're like, like you can't just be like hooking up with people. Like if you like someone in the club, date them, but like casual hookups is not going to be good for like building the trust in this club.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so we were like, no incest.
Yeah, Jill Kelly's quote that we still put on the slides is, "You can date, you can't just be fucking," though.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, which is I'm glad it's made it its way. It is true though. Like I had the responsibility of introducing that as a rule, like within scenes and also within the club. And some new people were like, "Wait, you can't just police that." And we were like, "No, what we mean." I don't know. I was like an awkward moment of like, you can do whatever you want, but like, don't make it weird.
Right. Like, we're not ever going to police some of these things and like throw you out in the club.
No.
But it's like, hey, there are people who have been in this club, like me, for 4.5 years who have started to discern things that helped the club grow, helped people like connect and form trust, and hurt people and inhibited the growth of this club. And so it's like, we're not trying to force these rules upon you. You can do what you want, but like, if you don't follow them and something bad happens, we warned you. We had the experience. We told you that this would be a bad idea.
Yeah, I mean, that's also like a rule for like any organization, or like if you like date someone that you work with too. It's gonna be awkward when you eventually don't be fucking anymore, or you're not dating anymore. Yeah, it's gonna be awkward,
like,
or someone's gonna leave.
Right, but like if you're not dating, like if you are dating and you do that for a while, like, and then you stop, you're going to have bigger things where, like, maybe someone will leave the club. They'll be like, I was really in this for another person. You know, this may not have been, like, my true calling and home. And they will leave, and it won't disturb the club. Because people find out kind of if they really want to be in Ridiculum early or not, or if they're just there to be with friends.
They find out if there is something facing of like, it's going to be weird if you show up, but if you still want to show up, that means you want to show up.
Yeah.
Which is great to discover. That's good to discover for the club, for yourself, for everyone else. That's good. I won't like throw the names out there, but two people that you and I know, like that occurred, and like both of them, of the entities of like Ridiculum and VTV, decided, okay, I'm sticking with VTV. This is obviously their space. I'm sticking with Ridiculum. This is obviously where I shine, and that's good.
And I had that experience too with someone in the club who I think enjoyed improv and enjoyed the people in it, but after the breakup decided, this isn't my club. This is your space, and I don't enjoy it as much as you. I have a calling for something very different, and stepped away from it. And I don't, to my understanding, there was no real issue from them stepping away from it.
Yeah. It's so... Good tangent about the rules, but you're establishing rules.
Yes.
Of in this club, you have your first show.
Called Word Vomit.
Word
and
Vomit.
It was in the St. Mary's Theater, which I still think is the best venue we played in because it was a real theater. It was smaller than the Connolly Cinema, and I think the allure of this new thing packed a bunch of people into it and came with a lot of good energy that has been harder to replicate since then. But I also think it was just the space itself.
I mean, imagine
very
if like
conducive to us.
but also like it's. I don't want to say, and I said this to Frank too in his episode. I was like, I'm not saying Ridiculum's gone downhill, but like imagine if an improv club showed up on your campus. That might be the most exciting, just because it's like, we don't have this thing. Let's go to this thing, and then it's gonna like find its plateau, which is kind of where we're at. Although it's kind of been on the rise a little bit this year, which is great. But yeah, that initial is going to be like, what is improv? I'm gonna go see that. What is that?
Yeah, and I don't want to like just be like regaling you with stories because we have
please
so much.
do.
But like
Please do.
there's so many little things I remember. Like before Word Vomit, Meg walking up to me and Claire Roberts before the show, and she's holding like a thermos of liquid, and she just leans into Claire and I and goes, this isn't water. And then takes a big gulp and walks away. And like 30 seconds later, we were going on stage.
Oh my God.
And
I talked about
afterwards, I like discovered it was just like full of red wine.
I talked about this with Siobhan too, and you heard like alcohol is present in Ridiculum and always will be, especially as a pre-show ritual.
Yeah, and I do want to say like, you don't need alcohol to be funny.
You don't.
And like, I don't think it is a necessary thing, and personally, not something I would do before a show. And it's solely because I want to. I personally don't feel like I need that like help loosening up. And I'm an uptight person. I am very anxious and uncomfortable all of the time.
Mm-hmm.
But like, for me, the act of improv or stand-up is what loosens me up. But there are some people who can't get themselves there and need the liquid courage to be able to be like, I can say yes to this.
And
thing.
I think about like Noel. Like Noel, I wouldn't say Noel's ever been drunk for a show, but like has gotten himself buzzed. And he performs fine. I don't think he prohibits himself enough where it's now detrimental to the show. For me, we haven't done as much. I'll be sure to do it before this show because I love it as a ritual. And I did it for my first show. Just a shooter. And for me, I don't love the 2 minutes after I do that, but tradition is like, and I'm not incredibly superstitious, but for something I care about so much especially, I'm like, it's got to be part of the process. And I don't enjoy the 2 minutes after I've taken that shooter, but after that, I'm like, cool. Now I'm going to do as good as I've ever done, and it's going to work out just how it always has.
It's like in Harry Potter, the like Verata serum, where he doesn't give it to Harry, but he convinces himself that he has. And so some people need it to just like convince themselves, which like if you need placebo, fine. Yeah. My whole thing has always been like, I don't want to set an example to the younger and newer members that it's like, you need to do this. This will help you. It's if you want to do it, you know the rules you're breaking.
Absolutely.
And it's up to you. And I know that makes me sound like a bit of a square, but you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
It's your choice.
Yeah. I think the communication across from it, especially I'm thinking about like communication that's been had with that specific thing happening within the club or before shows, from my perspective of like when it first happened when I was a freshman and Jill Kelly and Siobhan were like, hey, take a shooter, and it wasn't a peer pressure thing. I was like, I know I can say no. I would like to try this though.
Yeah.
It has refined itself to be like, guys, this is a tradition. If you don't want to do it, that's great. Honestly, it probably makes sense that you don't do it, but we're going to do it because we're going to do it. I don't know. And there's like enough people in our club too that are not like big on alcohol where it's like guys, we're funny either way.
Because we're also not like a club that I feel like is a alcohol club. And
we're not Club Swim.
Big, like,
we're not Club Swim.
And that's partially why I didn't continue with Club Swim, because I was on it my freshman year.
Yeah.
And I left it because I was like, this social scene is not for me. And I just don't think it's something I can grow into. And, you know, I didn't like start Ridiculum to like have my like response to it or something. But it was nice to build this space where it was like, we could, as we got older, casually drink. But also it wasn't like, you need this and this is going to be a rager. And I think it also allowed people to get more comfortable and trusting with each other, because it was like a no judgment if you want to do it. But like people are having their own good time and being very respectful of each other. And I think that in the first year or two of the club, it was a little tricky to find that, because you had some members who shall go nameless who were doing very strong substances that made many people feel uncomfortable. And that then got weeded out because they either graduated or left the club, and like the true identity of the club persisted. And if you didn't want to be a part of that, you probably didn't stick around.
The identity of Ridiculum, at least as far as I know and as far as I can confidently say when I'm gone from here, is that like those like members will exist in the club that love to do that before a show, and that's perfectly great. And it's also perfectly great if you don't, which I love that the balance is there. It exists. I would say it solely exists, and I'm going to shout out it exists thanks to my boys Justin and Owen, who don't, I'm not saying like they've never had a drop of alcohol, never done anything ever, but are on the more like, if we're talking about like this exec board that we have, they do help balance out the other side. I'm like in the middle, and then Jack and Noel kind of help. It's a nice teeter that we're sitting in. I love it.
It's because like there's no one identity you need to be a part of to be in Ridiculum.
Yeah.
Like, the thing you need to be is, like, trusting and loving and welcoming. Because, like, that's what's going to make good improv. And that's why, like, then in a social setting, there's some people who are going to get shit-faced and some people who aren't going to touch a drop. And they can have a great time together because that, like, the alcohol isn't, like, what's determining their connection. It's this love for this bigger thing that they both have developed a sense of, like, trust to share with each other. And why I really love Ridiculum and, like, the people in it, because it's not just like, we did this activity, well, like, now that we don't, like, what do we have in common? It's like, no, we, like, had to actually build, like, something that, like, makes us get along.
Yeah, it's I mean, I'm thinking about, like, I mean, and you're talking even about, like, those early days, like, you guys were figuring it out, building this, like, it is like building a machine trying to build an improv troupe, and it's especially complicated when then that machine has to exchange parts every few years.
Yeah,
and that's happening now, and it's very interesting.
And it's
to
also
see.
tough because we are a no-cuts club.
Yes.
There are a lot of improv clubs you have to audition, and they are only looking for a few people every year because they're only going to have 8 people. Ridiculum fluctuates every year because we don't cut anyone. But
we only, not necessarily cut, but we only do anything like that related to shows. Like, you'll be in the club, you might not be in the show.
And I was a bigger proponent of this than some people. But if you were not what we believe to be show ready, you were not going to be in the show. And it wasn't because we don't want you in the club and we're trying to send some kind of, like, passive aggressive, like, get out of our club thing. It was like the show is something we are charging money for people to see. We should always be putting our best foot forward. I want you to be a part of this show, but you have to reach a minimum threshold.
Yeah.
But I want to get you there. I want to figure out how to get you there. I don't want you to feel like we've given up on your dreams, because it would have been incredibly devastating to me if this club had existed. I joined it or tried to join it, and they're like, no,
and because you're not ready now, you're never ready ever. No, I mean, I remember that specifically, and I'm thinking about, like, some people that were in my Ridiculum class but didn't necessarily do the first show, where you were like, I don't think they're show ready, but God, I do want to get them there, because I want to get everyone there, because it's not fun to be in the club and not do the show if you were someone that wanted to. So this, like, and we've tried to, and I think we have carried it, especially this year, of, like, I don't think you're show ready, but God, I want you to be, so please show up, please listen to us. I really want you to get on stage and have a successful show with us, because also we want the more people on stage, but we also just can't filter anyone through. We have to make sure you're on there. And I think that's a good philosophy to have, and I've definitely, like, we've carried that, especially, like, seeing it from you, of, like, some people weren't in that first show just because they weren't ready. And I think you did as best job as you could to let them know this is why.
Yeah,
God,
and this
I'd love
is
to have you on.
what you need to work on. And it wouldn't just be like, you're not ready, like, tough shit.
Yeah.
We'd be like, hey, these are the things we want to see you focus on in practice. If you focus on these things, you will be more likely to be in the next show. And that was true in improv, and that was then true at the start of my sophomore, or I guess middle of my sophomore year, when we started the stand-up branch. And we were like, hey, just because what you wrote, like, didn't work now doesn't mean you shouldn't be doing this. It's going to take time and practice. And, like, the lesson that I had to start teaching myself was, like, you're not going to just be perfect the first time you did it. Because I just wanted to believe that, like, anytime I did anything, like, I would be good at it, and then, you know, everyone would love me and I'd be immediately, like, the best thing there ever was. Never the case. I've had to work very hard on that. And even for, like, this stand-up show that I just did with the alumni stand-up show, I think was my best show. And it's not because, like, I'm really good at stand-up. It's because after 4.5 years of trying to do stand-up, I finally found my voice.
Yeah.
I was trying to be a bunch of other stand-up comedians and not Andrew Mister. And once I finally matured, I mean, some of which is, like, getting to be 24 years old and, like, being around this enough, I finally found that my voice wasn't like a John Mulaney comic. And, like, the example that we gave was, there's this joke I tell where I'm talking about my name being Andrew Mister, and I was at a dentist recently, and I had this new hygienist. She sees my name and is like, oh, like, you're Mr. Mister. And the part of this bit is, like,
She's talking about the band.
I knew it was Mr. Mister. You know, there was a band named Mr. Mister in the 80s. I loved that band. I was 20 in the 80s. She's singing, she's dancing to the song. And if I were doing a John Mulaney setup, I'd be like, cool.
Do your job. Yeah, like
right, but I like that doesn't sound right coming out of me, and I know that doesn't sound right coming out.
And
of
God,
me.
I'm sure you wish it did, because it would be a great punch to do. Like, I hate it when I'm like, this is a very Mulaney thing. I'm not him.
But also, I know me. I know my personality. I know what like gets the laugh from me. The much better punchline for me to write was, as this dentist is doing all these things, to have me say, "Can you just put your hands in my mouth so I can go home?"
Which is very your voice was in it, and your tone like that fits. It was very like abrupt, and I told him I felt like invaded when he said it,
yes.
and that fits with
and
what
like
you tell.
we also then talked about how like I know where my line is and where the audience's comfortable line is. That's a strong punch to stop the line up. Or stop the line at. We could have done something where we like stuck our tongues out, and on an audio format this would come through great, where I'm like, but like,
I'm so sorry.
But that's creepy and loses the funny. Whereas just the very minimum, can you put your hands in my mouth? It's
enough.
It's enough. It's weird, but it's not disgusting weird yet that it can be funny. It took me 4.5 years to kind of find that part of my voice, coupled with I really like to tell stories, and I want to be able to be a storytelling comic, more like a Bert Kreischer type in that way. And once I was finally able to like accept, I'm not John Mulaney, I'm not Bo Burnham, I'm not Seth Meyers, I'm not these comedians that I love, but it's not my voice. I need to go find that storytelling thing. And so the stories I then told, I think not only came across as funnier sets I've done, but it felt like Andrew Mister performing stand-up, and it felt more authentic and like, oh, he seems happy up there. He seems comfortable. He doesn't seem like he's trying to be someone else. And what we've talked about with Ridiculum was setting that example to Ridiculum, everyone in its club, that whoever you are, as we talked about drinker, non-drinker, whether you come in with a lot of talent or you're very rough around the edges and need help, you are welcomed here because we are trying to find who you are. Because at the end of the day, as I've gotten older and experienced more comedy and worked in writing and comedy now, comedy is an authentic expression of yourself. And the moment you stop trying to be someone else is the moment you can finally be funny.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's a perfect way to encapsulate. Yeah, because I do think I'm thinking of like examples of like in practices where like then there's been some members that like love doing callbacks of like jokes that like aren't theirs, and there's a difference of like it's a club joke or like that's Frank's thing, like don't do Frank's thing. And it's not like we're policing what you can say, but it's like I can tell that's not you. And this is all in the most positive way. Let's find you.
Yeah.
I would love to find you so that it's not awkward every time like we do a show, Frank does a joke, and then like 2 games later you do the same joke and everyone's like, okay, so like neither of them I really like. And that diminishes both of you. Like finding you is big. And that's what, I mean, we haven't necessarily explicitly said that, especially for the new people we have this year, but like finding specifically who they are and like throwing them in different games it's weird. You guys did this. You guys would do this with us. It's weird to see. It's weird to be doing it with people.
We had to figure out like who you were.
Yeah.
And it doesn't get solved in one practice or in a semester of being in the club.
It doesn't even get solved in one show. Like
it will take the 4 years. I mean, for me, I was in the club for 4.5 years. I don't think I found it until after the club. I thought that like the alumni shows I did were some of my best work because I finally like had crossed the threshold of maturity.
Yeah.
And that was, it's been a very freeing truth to have, but also an infuriating truth to be like, I had access to improv and stand-up all the time, and I was terrible at it because I couldn't just be myself for a second.
No, I mean, I think it's like, first of all, you weren't terrible at it, but it was like, you were still trying to find, which like, people have asked me like, oh, what kind of comedy or what's like your comedy voice in terms of like stand-up specifically, which is where I struggle most with like figuring it out. I don't fucking know. And to be honest, at this point as like president of the club, and this isn't, I feel this like obligation of like, I will go perform in shows because I've done stand-up before, and if we need people in the set list, I will go do that. It's my duty. I'll do that. Stand-up is not my thing, though. I don't enjoy it as much as I do improv. It's not what I thought freshman year, for sure. I was definitely like, stand-up's going to be my thing. And then the whole year I didn't share anything. And then finally I did. And then even like since then, I've noticed like, it's not what I thought it was going to be. But improv, that's up my alley. That's where I go. So at this point, it's like, I will go perform in a show, and I'm not going to not have fun. I love performing in general. But it's not my thing. And if I don't need to, which is an example, like this weekend, I didn't need to perform. We had people performing. Cool. I'll do all the background stuff. I will be your president. I don't want to perform then.
And that's how I felt with stand-up, is I did stand-up through college. I performed at some clubs in New York, and I was always like, I need this. And then at some point, I just stopped doing it because I had that realization of, I don't actually need this. This scene isn't for me. What I'm getting out of it isn't, like, helping me. Like, it isn't making me feel, like, more validated or better. I just feel like I'm doing it. Like, the laughs don't mean as much to me right now. Simultaneously, I discovered I really loved to write and was going through a career pivot of being an engineering student into being a writer. And I really enjoyed getting to sit down and massage a script and kind of flush out all of the little jokes and making sure that it was really punchy and like every bit of dialogue interacted with itself and was like, it was referential to the previous line and kind of felt very fun. And being able to craft that and build that was far more entertaining to me than the stress of like having to perform a set, including writing it, practicing it, sitting in the venue and watching other people go up and be funny and be like, oh, I'm probably not going to do that well. Yeah. And so once I realized like that comparison game I was doing, I was like, this is not for me because this is not a healthy comedy experience. And it's how I then got to where I am now, where I work as a writer.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so we're not going to get through the whole thing, and
no,
God, I can't wait to have you back.
And maybe we don't go to that. We stick with Ridiculum today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm cool with that.
Yeah.
So I want to ask specifically, like, you know, you go this like first year of Ridiculum, and I assume y'all feel good about it with like the size of the club and like first shows, like, oh, that went like. People laughed, and I've watched it. People loved it. It's a good show. Like
the school had given us money to be a club.
Yeah,
so we were like, okay, this club is now considered legitimate. It exists, and now we have to go start keeping it to exist in perpetuity. And so we enter that second year. We're at the involvement fair now, and we bring in people like Becca Fink, Patrick Lyons, who end up being mainstays of the club.
Yeah. Did it seem like they were going to, some of them?
Well, it's so funny because when I think of these people, I think of how I know them now and how my life could not have existed without them.
Yeah.
But those first practices where, like everyone else, they came, they sat in the back, they observed, they were trying to decide, is this something I can put myself in front of? And all we could do was do what we were doing normally, doing improv or stand-up, and trying to convince them, hey, like, if you're comfortable, you should give it a try. We're not going to, like, no one's going to make fun of you. No one, like, the point is to make us laugh. And, like, if you get up and try, that's just as good.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing those people start to get a little more comfortable. They'd do a bit that caught on, and you would see these people have that aha moment. And that was so rewarding to, even though I was maybe 2 steps ahead of them on the path, to be able to look back and be like, oh, they're walking it with me.
Oh,
that's
yeah,
so
for sure.
fun. And
yeah, because I'm sure in those early days, as much as you were technically more experienced than some of these people, it was early in Ridiculum, and like I'm sure you were still learning stuff about improv to the point where at times it would feel like they're learning about the same as much as I am, and it's great to be.
And
learning
I'm
with
learning
them.
from them because people will come with skill sets. I mean, like Jay Dolan came up with this phenomenal impression skill set and truly a wonderful listening ability to really hear what someone was saying, the absurdity in it, and immediately respond to it. Skills that I wish I had.
Me too. I think about the fact that, and I sort of think about the fact that like Jay Dolan didn't do improv before. Jay Dolan started doing improv close to the same time Ridiculum did. Like, and that's insane because I'll stand to it. And this never is a disparagement against any improviser or comedian I've ever met. He's still the best improviser I've met in terms of improv. Like in almost all aspects, best one I've met. And yet, and it's crazy though how many people are really close to that too. But he is the best. Like as far as people that I've met, and I hate that I only got 1 year with him. But and I would have loved to see what him growing into that was, because I wonder how fast it was. Like, there he is. There's Jay Dolan.
It's like I remember it's like he had done it the whole time. There wasn't much of a learning curve for him.
Awesome. That's really cool.
But so then sophomore year, we have Spit Take, which is our second show we're doing in the fall semester, and now we added like an opening monologue because we were trying to dip ourselves into other comedy and what else we were going to do, and we did 2 shows on the same night. We did a 7 p.m. show and a 10 p.m. show.
This was the first show that Frank Samutis attended.
That is correct.
Soon to be vice president of the club.
That is correct.
It's so fun to think that people were like trickling in.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. If you could like map the timeline of when people started coming in, like I said, there are those moments. I had mine where you had no idea that your life was about to change.
Absolutely. Did you? I hate to keep interrupting, but I'm really just so curious about so many things. Like, not even specifically to ask about me, but like our years too. Only because these are the people that I have perspective on. Like, did it seem like Owen or myself or like Nate or Noel or like Georgia or Juliet? Was it like it seems like they're gonna be here, or was it they're like kind of thinking about it or whatever? Like, what did like was it similar experience to like watching Becca or Pat or like those other members that you kind of grew alongside? Because you were more of a I am doing improv and I am good and and I'm watching these new people decide.
Well, it was more of having done it for 3 years, once the group you listed showed up, I had developed more skills in the leadership positions to figure out what people needed and to identify what they need to work on. So it was much easier for me to kind of diagnose someone and look at them and be like, this is what you need to work on. Whereas like when Beck and Pat would show up, they'd be like, I'm nervous. I'd be like, shit, I'm nervous too.
Me too.
That's the problem, I guess.
How many shows have you done? 1. Cool.
Yeah. Like, so I didn't know what I didn't know.
Nice. That's very interesting. Okay, cool.
And so as I got older, I started to like know like, oh, this is what helped me. And I'm seeing myself in everyone in certain parts of like what has gone terribly or is still a weakness of mine. And then it was easier to be able to look at people and like be like, this is what you need, or like see them get up there and be like, they've had this moment where it's clicked and they've figured out that they either like this or they're good at this thing, and now they're going to start doing it again and again.
And God, that's a cool moment to see. And God, I've gotten to see it this year, and it's really fucking cool. And I'm like, oh, I had that moment. Sorry to interrupt you. Now we're at Spit Take. You were talking about Spit Take and the fact that y'all had 2 shows that night, which is the only time Ridiculum's ever done that.
Because our first show did so well, it sold out. So we were like, maybe we should divide this into 2 shows. And we have the 7 p.m. show for the early people who just want to go to a show but then do something else, and the 10 p.m. for the drunks who want to show up shit-faced and just scream at us. And that worked. We sold pretty decently, but it wasn't, I think, the best idea. We got a little burned out as a club, the people who performed in both shows. And I think we were also just trying to give everyone who was in the club a chance to perform by being like, hey, you can have 1 part in 1 show. And that's it, because we don't want to put you in anymore. And then the people who were like had been around a lot were like, you're going to be throughout all these shows. But again, we were learning. The only way to learn is through failing, and so
the only way to begin is by beginning.
Well, exactly, and so we just had to do it to know.
Yeah,
and now we knew, and we were like, we're never going to do 2 shows again on the same night. That's just not a good way to do things. So we go through that, and then that's where the stand-up branch starts, because I am continuing to get this itch of I really want to try stand-up, and I have no idea where to go and where to do it, and Jack Brenner and I are both itching to do stand-up, and we're writing stuff, and we get together and we start to form the stand-up branch, and there's a few of us who'll meet in like in the VTV studio at weird hours to just like write a few jokes and try it. And I remember on a December night, Jack takes me to the Comedy Cabaret in Philadelphia, or like outskirts of Philadelphia, and it is a tiny ass club. There is like no one there. It is like just the comics and this one old woman who looks like she had just come from a funeral and was like using her finger to like stir her martini.
Wow.
It was bizarre. And the people who got up there said some of the most problematic things I have ever heard. And this was December, so this is the holiday season. And it was Hanukkah. And I remember one guy getting up and being like, oh, it's Hanukkah. I'll let the Jews have this week off. And I was like, what is happening?
So glad I'm here this week. My God. That sucks.
And there was another comic who's like from Hawaii, and he moved to the area recently, and he was blind. And people kept going at him and joking at him the entire show. And it was a really rude awakening for like what part of comedy is and certain circles and what you do and do not want to be a part of.
Yeah, that's a rough start for the
And
stand-up
I
branch.
was like 19, not good at comedy, and like, what is this? And so Jack and I do this show. It went as good as you can probably expect it to a go, which was terrible. And we went home and we listened to Weird Al Yankovic and The Lonely Island the entire time. He missed an exit and on the turnpike, which cost us like $10 more and 30 more minutes of our time after we were just like, I want to go home and pretend this night never happened.
And I love that that's the start, and then you guys like decide, because that is what like the stand-up branch tries to stick with. Like, you're like, if we do a stand-up branch, we're not doing any of that shit.
And we
Fuck that.
And we were immediately like, we are going to perform on campus for a little bit. We are not going to send people into the wild unprepared.
And we still haven't, and we never will, and we will never go into the wild because everyone out there is bad
and scary
and terrifying
and maybe problematic.
Yeah, maybe Kevin Keane can go perform in New York if he wants, but I'm staying in my bubble. I'm good.
And so that then takes us to, in the spring, the Ultimate Crossover event, which was where we did an improv show where there was some stand-up at the start, because we wanted to start getting the people who wanted to do stand-up up in front of a crowd and being like, is stand-up something people will watch? And it was right as COVID was happening. So we had gone home for spring break. We come back. We do this show. We get sent home for months.
Yep.
And everything pauses. And there's this huge question around live performances and like, will we ever be back in person again? And now we're trying to figure out, what is this club going to be?
And that's where we're going to stop. Just like they had to for a fucking while. Great. Thank you. That was beautiful, mister. That's a terrifying place to be, and you're going to have to just hang in there, listeners, as much as they did for, I don't know who knows how long. We'll see. I have to imagine that, like, I have to imagine that, you know, that moment. I've said to multiple guests already and be like, I can't imagine Ridiculum still existed, but I can't imagine being without what Ridiculum is now, and being without being in 305 and doing improv. I can't imagine being without that for that long. And I know that I like how long that was and what I was even going through in general when I was in high school. So I can't imagine that in college after I already attached myself to this thing.
And as a little teaser, next time on My Friends the Comedians with Andrew Mister, you'll hear about what's doing stand-up on Zoom was like. Here's a little spoiler alert. Not good.
Not good at all. Well, we will definitely have Mr. back on the show to tell the rest of the story, and also just to talk to him generally about how he feels, because this is a show.
Because I work as like a comedian who writes.
God,
I'm a writer.
I
That's
hate
a part
that,
about my life that we just didn't touch.
I do hate that we didn't get to it, but I will definitely be having Mr. back on to talk more about that and to give us the second half of his story, especially to tell me about what it was like leaving, getting out of there. I love hearing about my year, too. That's my favorite part.
Yeah. The story, there'll be more stories as we get further along as I remember them, because most of the stuff I forgot.
Absolutely. So we'll give him that time to think about that. I want to thank Andrew Mister for being on the show, and I want to thank Andrew Mister for the use of this podcast theme song, Cruisin'. God, I love this song, and I'm glad that I have it for my show. Thank you so much. My name is Jacob Marscola, reminding you to laugh, especially when it's funny.